Minho had moved on without realizing what had quietly changed. But Gia had taken that chapter of her life and turned it into something extraordinary. The most surprising thing, he did not know how different things had become or the life she had built in his absence. Yoon-jia stood in her corner office overlooking Wongali Beach, reviewing the morning schedule on her tablet. Elegance Events Korea, the company that had grown from her kitchen table catering business, now occupied the entire 15th floor of the prestigious Marine Tower building. The brass nameplate on her mahogany desk read, Yoon-jia, President and CEO. At 36, Gia had transformed not just her circumstances, but herself. The unsure young woman who had once tried to fit into Minho's life was gone. In her place stood a confident professional who entered any room because she had earned her place through creativity, skill, and steady determination. Yoon Sajing Nim, her assistant, Lee Mi-sun, appeared in the doorway. The Park family is here for their consultation. Send them in, please. And remind me I need to leave by 4:30 today for Tae-jun and Jaemin's academic awards ceremony. The Park consultation went smoothly. They wanted Elegance Events to coordinate their son's wedding, a beautiful celebration with 300 guests, a budget of 150 million won, and every detail customized. 5 years ago, such a project would have seemed like a dream. Now, it was Tuesday's second appointment. Your portfolio is impressive, Mrs. Park said, flipping through the leather-bound albums showcasing Gia's work. The regional charity gala last month was absolutely stunning, and I heard you also organized a major department store celebration. Everyone's still talking about the ice displays. Gia smiled politely. Each event is designed to reflect our clients' dreams and honor their most special moments. The truth was, Elegance Events had become one of the most respected event planning companies in the region. Gia's mix of artistic creativity, flawless organization, and sincere care for her clients had built a reputation that kept her booked nearly 2 years ahead. She employed 18 full-time staff members and worked with a trusted circle of vendors who valued the chance to collaborate with her. But beyond business success, what brought Gia the greatest joy was seeing her sons grow in confidence and happiness, becoming everything she had hoped for. At 4:15, Gia left the office early to attend Tae-jun and Jaemin's awards ceremony at Bisan International School. The private school had been one of her best choices not only for education, but for the confidence it had given her children. She arrived at the campus and felt comfortable walking through the marble halls lined with portraits of distinguished graduates. The first time she had come here for the boys' entrance interview, she had felt unsure. Now, as a supporter of the school and a member of the parent advisory board, she belonged there completely. Yoon Park Soo-jin, mother of one of Jaemin's classmates, waved her over. I was hoping to catch you. Did you get my message about the spring fundraising committee? Yes. I'll be happy to coordinate the silent auction, Gia replied. Elegance Events will handle it pro bono. Of course, Soo-jin beamed. You're incredible. I don't know how you manage everything, your company, the boys, all your community involvement. The ceremony began, and Gia found her seat in the third row, reserved for families of honor students. She watched with immense pride as both her sons were called to the stage for very different achievements that reflected their distinct personalities. Tae-jun was named Student Council President for the upcoming year, the youngest student ever elected to the position. At 10 years old, he possessed natural charisma that drew people to him, combined with an ethical compass that Gia had worked hard to instill. He was the kind of leader who inspired others through genuine care. Jaemin received the Creative Arts Excellence Award for a short story he'd written about a single mother who built a business empire while raising twins. His teacher had submitted it to a national youth writing contest where it had placed second among thousands of entries. Jaemin had inherited Gia's emotional intelligence but combined it with an artistic soul that saw beauty in everything. When they returned to their seats, Tae-jun leaned over and whispered, "Thanks for being here, Oma. I know you had important meetings today." "There's nowhere else I'd rather be," Gia whispered back, meaning every word. Jaemin, more observant than his brother, studied her face carefully. "Are you proud of us?" The question caught Gia off guard. "Sweetheart, I'm so proud of you both that I sometimes can't breathe from the joy of it. You've become such a remarkable young man. Good, Jaemin said seriously. Because we're really proud of you too. Tommy Park So-ma said you're the most successful woman she knows. Later that evening, after celebrating at the boys' favorite restaurant, a small Galbi place in Seoul, Jia tucked them into bed in their beautiful apartment in Marine City. The home was a testament to how far they'd come. 3 bedrooms, a gourmet kitchen where Jia still loved to experiment with recipes, and a balcony overlooking the ocean. Oma, Jaemin said as she kissed his forehead. Can I ask you something that might be hard to answer? Jia sat on the edge of his bed, recognizing his serious tone. Of course, sweetheart. Do you ever think about our father? Not like missing him or anything, he added quickly, but wondering what his life is like now. The question was more complex than Jaemin probably realized. Sometimes, Jia admitted, but not the way I used to. How did you used to think about him? Taejun asked, appearing in the doorway in his pajamas. Jia considered how to answer honestly without burdening them with her pain. For a long time, I thought about him with hurt and anger. He'd made me feel worthless, and I carried that feeling around like a heavy stone. But not anymore, Jaemin asked. No, not anymore. Now, when I think about him, I mostly feel curious. I wonder if he's content, if he ever reflects on the decisions he made, if he realizes what he missed by not being part of your lives. Taejun climbed onto the bed beside his brother. Do you think he knows about us? About what we've accomplished? Jia pulled both boys close, touched by their maturity and thoughtfulness. I think there are probably moments when he wonders how we are doing. But honestly, it doesn't matter anymore whether he knows or not. We built something beautiful all on our own. Sometimes I wonder if we would have been different if he had stayed, Jaemin said quietly. Maybe not as close to you. Maybe not as strong. I guess like we had to learn to take care of each other because it was just us 3. Jia felt warmth rise behind her eyes. You know what? I think you're absolutely right. The 3 of us became a team because we needed to, and that made us stronger than most families ever get to be. Plus, Taejun added with 10-year-old certainty, if he was the kind of person who could leave the people who cared about him, we probably wouldn't have liked him very much anyway. As Jia turned out the lights and headed to her own room, she reflected on the path that had brought them here. 10 years ago, she'd felt lost and unsure of her own value. Tonight, she was the CEO of a thriving company, the mother of 2 extraordinary children, and a respected member of her community. She had proven Minho's expectations wrong in every possible way. But more importantly, she had proven something to herself, that self-worth isn't defined by someone else's opinion, no matter how unkindly it's spoken. Standing at her bedroom window, looking out at the lights reflecting off the coastline, Jia allowed herself to wonder what Minho's life looked like now. Was he happy? Had he achieved everything he'd thought he wanted when he had chosen a different path? The questions no longer came from a place of sadness or longing. They came from a quiet sense of wonder about the different directions life can take. Minho had made his choice based on what he believed would bring him success. Jia had made hers based on care and responsibility. Looking at the life she'd built, the sons she'd raised, and the respect she'd earned, Jia knew without a doubt which choice had led to true fulfillment. She had learned that the best way to respond to someone's unkind words isn't through anger, it's by building a life so meaningful and joyful that those opinions no longer matter. Choi Min-ho had once doubted her, but his words had long since lost any power to affect her. Yoon Ji-ah was everything she had chosen to become, and that transformation had been achieved entirely through her own courage, love, and belief in her value. Choi Min-ho stood on the balcony of his high-rise apartment in the city, gazing down at the glowing skyline with the calm satisfaction of someone who believed he had achieved everything important. At 38, he had carefully reached every goal he'd set for himself: a real estate business worth billions of won, strong connections throughout the city, and now the ideal partner to complete his well-planned life. But lately, in quiet moments like this, Minho found his thoughts drifting to memories he had thought were long gone. The stillness of his perfect routine had begun to feel empty, and he couldn't ignore the quiet sense that something meaningful was missing. "Dear, the planner is here," Park Hae-won called from inside the apartment, her voice carrying the soft excitement that had first drawn him in. She wants to go over the final guest list. Minho straightened his silk tie and walked back into the living room, where Haiwon was seated gracefully on their white leather sofa. At 28, she embodied everything he had convinced himself he wanted: beautiful, from a well-known family, educated at a top university. Her father owned a chain of luxury hotels across the country. Her mother served on several respected community boards, and Haiwon herself moved through social circles with the calm ease of someone accustomed to it. She was, Minho had often told himself, the perfect choice. Choi Si, the wedding planner, a severe woman named Miss Kang, looked up from her tablet. We have confirmations from 243 guests so far. The mayor's office called to confirm his attendance, and Senator Kim's wife will be representing their family. Minho nodded with satisfaction. This wedding would be the social event of the season 50 guests at the Grand Shilla Hotel in Seoul, with dinner catered by the city's most exclusive restaurant. More importantly, it would be public validation of his choices. Everyone who mattered would witness his triumph. What about the press coverage? Minho asked. 3 newspapers will cover the society pages, plus Seoul Life magazine wants to do a 6-page feature spread. Miss Kang replied efficiently. This will definitely be one of the most photographed weddings of the year. That was exactly what Minho wanted. Oh, Minho appa, Haiwon said suddenly, examining her perfectly manicured nails. Didn't you mention wanting to invite that woman from your past? Your first wife? Minho's jaw tightened at the reminder. Yes, Yoon Jia. Have we sent her invitation yet? The truth was, Minho had been thinking about Jia more often than he cared to admit. Not with longing or regret, he'd convinced himself he felt neither, but with nagging curiosity about what had happened to her after he'd left. 10 years of complete silence. No attempts at contact, no requests for money, nothing. The absence of drama had been exactly what he'd wanted, but lately it felt almost unsettling. I have her address here. Miss Kang consulted her list. Apartment for 112. Sahagu, Bizen. Shall I add her to the formal invitation list? Absolutely. Minho's smile was cold and calculating. Make sure she gets the full invitation package, the embossed stationery, the silk envelope, everything. I want her to understand exactly what kind of event this is. The decision wasn't entirely rational. Minho knew there was something driving him to invite Jia that he couldn't quite name. Part curiosity, part something else. Perhaps a need to prove to himself that his choices had been correct. Haiwon looked puzzled. Why invite an ex-wife to your wedding? Isn't that asking for drama? Minho walked to the windows again, his hands clasped behind his back. Let's call it closure, Jogya. Jia needs to see what real success looks like. She needs to understand the difference between her world and mine. But even as he said it, Minho wasn't entirely sure what he expected to accomplish. In his mind, Jia was frozen in time, the broken, desperate woman he'd left behind 10 years ago. He imagined her still struggling, still marked by the poverty he'd predicted for her. Inviting her would be a final demonstration of how right he'd been to leave, how much better his life had become. Where is Sahagu? Haiwon asked, wrinkling her nose delicately. I don't think I've ever heard of it. It's in Bizen, Minho replied dismissively. The old industrial district, definitely not your social circle, Jogya. Miss Kang cleared her throat diplomatically. Actually, Choi Si, I should mention I had to do some research to find the correct address. There are several Yoonjias in Bizen. The information I found suggests she may have moved around quite a bit over the years. Perfect, Minho said with satisfaction. That's exactly what I expected. But something in Miss Kang's tone suggested there was more to the story. Sir, there was also some mention of children. Minho's expression hardened. That's not my concern. The conversation was interrupted by Haiwon's phone ringing with the distinctive tone she'd assigned to her wedding dress fittings. As she took the call, chattering about alterations and accessories, Minho found his mind drifting. Children. The word stirred something uncomfortable in his chest. Not regret exactly, but a strange hollowness he'd never quite managed to fill despite all his success. Jia was reviewing vendor contracts in her office when Mi-sun knocked on the door, holding a cream-colored envelope with obvious curiosity. This came by special delivery, Sajingnam Mi-sun said, setting the envelope on Jia's desk. Very fancy hand-delivered by a courier, if you can believe that. Jia glanced at the envelope and immediately recognized the expensive paper stock and formal calligraphy. But it was the return address that made her blood run cold. Mr. Choi Minho and Miss Park Hae-won. But that wasn't right. Minho wasn't married. As far as she knew, he was still single. Unless... With trembling fingers, Jia opened the envelope and pulled out the thick embossed invitation card. Mr. Choi Min-ho and Miss Park Hae-won request the honor of your presence at their wedding ceremony. Saturday, the 15th of June at 6 o'clock in the evening, the Grand Shilla Hotel. Seoul reception to follow. Black tie required. Jia stared at the invitation for a long moment, her heart pounding. Minho was getting married. After 10 years of silence, he had chosen to invite her to witness his new beginning. But why? She turned the invitation over and found a handwritten note in Minho's familiar script. Jia, I thought you might enjoy seeing how well some people's lives turn out. I hope you'll be able to attend. It should be quite an enlightening experience for you. CAMH. The casual tone of the note hit her with unexpected force. Even after all these years, even with all her success and transformation, Minho still saw her as someone beneath him, someone who needed to be shown her place. Jia set the invitation down carefully and walked to her window, looking out at the Byzantine skyline she now knew so well. Minho had no idea who she'd become. In his mind, she was probably still that broken woman he'd left behind, struggling in poverty. This invitation wasn't about celebrating his happiness. It was about forcing her to witness what he perceived as her continued struggle compared to his triumph. Yoon Sajingnam, Mi-sun's voice was concerned. Are you all right? You look upset. Jia turned back to her assistant, forcing a smile. I'm fine. Just an invitation from someone I used to know. Must be quite someone to send such an elaborate invitation. Oh, he thinks he is, Jia said quietly. After Mi-sun left, Jia sat back down at her desk and read the invitation again. The Grand Shilla Hotel. She'd coordinated events there many times. Black tie required. She had a closet full of designer hanbok and gowns now. June 15th. She was currently free that evening. Minho expected her to either not show up at all or to arrive looking shabby and out of place, confirming his opinion that she never amounted to anything. He wanted to parade his success in front of her, to prove to himself and his new society friends that he'd been right to discard her. What Minho didn't know was that Yoon Jia was no longer the woman who could be intimidated. She was no longer someone who would shrink away from a challenge. She picked up her phone and dialed Eugene number. Uni, it's me. Are you free for lunch today? I have something interesting to show you. An hour later, Jia and Eugene sat in their favorite cafe, the wedding invitation spread between them on the small table. Eugene's eyes were wide with disbelief as she read Minho's handwritten note for the third time. I cannot believe this man, Eugene said, her voice rising with indignation. After 10 years of silence, he invites you to his wedding just to show off? What kind of person does that? The kind of person who needs to prove he was right about everything, Jia said calmly, sipping her coffee. He thinks I'm still the desperate woman who begged him not to leave. You're not going, right? Eugene's voice was firm. You're going to ignore this nonsense and throw the invitation where it belongs. Jia was quiet for a long moment, studying the elegant script on the invitation. Actually, Uni, I think I am going to go. Jia, yeah. Ania. Eugene reached across the table and grabbed her sister's hand. Why would you put yourself through that? You've built such a beautiful life. Why give him the satisfaction? Because, Jia said slowly, a smile beginning to form on her lips, he's expecting to see the old Jia, the broken, struggling woman he left behind. He has no idea who I've become. Eugene's expression shifted from concern to understanding. You want to show him what he lost. I want to show him exactly what he threw away when he called me worthless. Jia's voice was steady and sure. I want him to see Tae-jun and Jaemin, his sons that he never wanted. I want him to see the successful businesswoman I became. The life I built from the ashes he left behind. The twins, Eugene breathed. You're going to bring the boys? They're 10 years old, Uni. Old enough to handle a formal event, and definitely old enough to see their Oma celebrated for who she really is. Gio's eyes sparkled with purpose. Minho thinks he's setting up my humiliation. Instead, he's giving me the perfect opportunity to show him the truth. Yujin was quiet for a moment, then a slow smile spread across her face. You know what? You're absolutely right. That man has no idea what's coming for him. None at all, Gia agreed. He's about to learn that when you throw away something precious, you don't get to decide what it becomes in your absence. She folded the invitation carefully and put it back in her purse. I need to start planning. The boys will need formal wear, and I'll need something spectacular to wear. This is going to be expensive, Uni. Are you sure you want to spend that kind of money just to prove a point? Gia thought about all the years of struggle, all the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, all the times she'd doubted herself because of Minho's cruel words. Uni, she said firmly, there's no amount of money I wouldn't spend to show Choi Minho exactly who he's dealing with now. As they left the cafe, Gia felt that familiar fire burning in her chest, the same sense of purpose that had carried her through night school, through building her business, through every challenge of the past 10 years. Minho thought he was orchestrating her humiliation. Instead, he'd just given her the stage for her greatest triumph. The broken woman he'd discarded was long gone. In her place stood Yoon-jia, and she was ready to show the world exactly what Choi Minho had been foolish enough to throw away. The next morning, Gia woke with a sense of purpose that felt almost electric. As she prepared breakfast for Taejun and Jaemin, her mind was already working through the logistics of what she'd privately begun calling Operation Truth. Minho's wedding was in exactly 3 weeks. Enough time to orchestrate the perfect entrance, but not so much time that she could second-guess herself. Oma, you seem different today, Taejun observed, looking up from his rice and miyaguk with sharp perception. Excited, different. Did something big happen with the company? Gia smiled at her intuitive son. Something like that, Gia. How would you and Jaemin like to attend a very elegant, very important wedding with me? Jaemin's eyes lit up with curiosity. What kind of wedding? Do we know the people getting married? It's a very formal affair, black tie, 500 guests at the Grand Shilla Hotel in Seoul. You'd need to wear tuxedos and be on your absolute best behavior around some very important people. Tuxedos? Taejun straightened in his chair, suddenly looking more like a young businessman than a 10-year-old. Like at the charity galas we attend with you? Exactly like that, but even more formal. I need to know you can handle yourselves with complete dignity around people who might be judgmental. Jaemin, always more sensitive to emotional undercurrents, studied his mother's face carefully. Oma, is this about something serious? You look like you do when you're preparing for a really important business presentation. Gio knelt down to their level, recognizing that her sons deserved more honesty than most children their age could handle. But Taejun and Jaemin weren't typical children. They'd been raised in circumstances that had forced them to mature quickly. Agya-dul, you remember how I've always told you that your appa chose not to be part of our lives before you were born? Both boys nodded solemnly. Well, this wedding is his wedding. He's getting married, and he invited us to attend. Taejun's expression sharpened with understanding beyond his years. He invited us after all this time? Why? I think, Gia said carefully. He wants to show us how successful he's become. He probably expects us to look impressed or maybe even sad that we're not part of his life. But we're not sad, Jaemin said matter-of-factly. We have a great life. Why would we be sad about missing out on someone who didn't want us? Gia felt a surge of pride at her son's emotional intelligence. You're absolutely right. And that's exactly what I want him to see, that we're not sad. We're not struggling. And we don't need anything from him.